As a fitness professional, you know the joy of helping others, and you know it's more than just fitness. We're training the whole person. Wellness coaching provides expertise that goes beyond fitness and nutrition. It's a holistic approach to helping others become their best selves while reaching their goals. To us, there's no greater joy than that. Join the fitness leader. Become a fitness leader. Become a certified wellness coach. Go to nasm.org/wellness.
Hey everyone, welcome to Strong Mind, Strong Body. Today we are going to talk about a topic that I'm always so passionate and eager to talk about, and that is mental health. And I feel like since the pandemic, mental health has come to the forefront, as it should. It was a long time waiting, right? Mental health was sitting in the back seat, physical health was sitting in the front seat. And now I feel like we get it, that they both need to sit in the front seat together. One can be the passenger, one can be the driver, but they go together. So today specifically, we're going to talk about hormones and nutrition and how hormones and nutrition interact or basically affect our mental health. So I have a friend of a friend on today. She is amazing. She does so many things. Her name is Nitiya Guin. I hope I said her last name correctly. Nitiya is a licensed naturopathic doctor. She also owns Deep Living. She also teaches at a university, and she is just such an expert on this topic. So we are going to talk about how hormones, nutrition, and mental health, all the intricate links. We're also going to talk about the how nutritional deficiencies can impact serotonin and dopamine levels, which of course affects our mood and drives up anxiety. So hopefully Nitiya is going to give us some natural strategies to balance female and male hormones and to optimize our gut health and to support our overall mental health. So Nitiya, I'm going to bring you in and have you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Angie. It's such a pleasure to see you and to meet all of you today. Yes, I'm Dr. Nitiya Guin, and I am very passionate about empowering people in their health. We often feel kind of pigeonholed when we go to see our doctors and we're told these are our couple of options, and that is what we use to feel well. And the truth is you are your own best doctor. And so you should know all the natural options, all the lifestyle options, and then the more conventional higher order options as well. And so that's what Deep Living Wellness is really all about, and what I focus on in every area of my work, from working with patients to teaching at multiple universities.
You know what? I so appreciate the fact, Natiya, that you just said that we are our best doctor, because I always say that we're the best person in charge of our health. We're the best person in charge of our physical well-being. We know our bodies, we know our minds more than anyone else. And I think sometimes where the kind of imposter syndrome comes in is we feel these things or we experience these things, but if a physician or a therapist doesn't back it up, then we start to doubt our own ability to kind of judge where we are with our health and well-being. And so I love that from where you stand, your goal is just to empower us and to say, no, actually, listen to your mind, listen to your body. And so I want to deep dive into that today, because just in the short time that I have known you and we've had conversations, it has been very healing and revealing to me to hear you talk about these things. So the first thing that I want to ask Nitiya is, I just want to better understand the connection between nutritional deficiencies and hormonal imbalances, because I know that when we're deficient in certain nutrients, it does impact our mental health. And I feel like our first go-to is people say, well, go exercise or go take a pill. But what can we do on a day-to-day basis with our nutrition that can impact it?
Absolutely. So I do think go exercise or get movement is a wonderful first step. That, with good sleep and finding joy, those are the lifestyle areas that we always want to focus on. But something that I noticed that's missing often in medicine is looking into nutritional deficiencies. We do our general blood work, our CBC and our CMP. We hardly ever check anything else, our vitamin D, our B12 levels, our zinc. And these are foundational for building hormones. So when we have nutritional deficiencies, we cannot make hormones at the optimal level, and they're hardly ever checked in traditional medicine. So there are a couple of ways to deal with that. We can actually test our labs through serum or cortisol or urine and actually find out where our nutrition levels are at to see if we have the foundation to make the adequate amount of hormones. And today we're talking mostly about estrogen and testosterone, our vitality hormones, but that also includes progesterone, cortisol, and to give a definition to help clarify, vitamins are organic compounds that are essential for normal physiological functions, and we have to get them in our diet. Our bodies don't make vitamins. So if we're not bringing them in through our food, our water, some through the sun like vitamin D, then we do not have those building blocks for our hormones. So that's how crucial they are. And then hormones are chemical messengers sent out by our endocrine glands, our ovaries, our adrenal glands, our thyroid, that tell the body to do something and help with brain function. And when we talk about chemical messengers that are hormones, we also want to talk about chemical messengers that are neurotransmitters. You mentioned serotonin and dopamine. So when our hormones, our chemical messengers that are sent out into the blood, then go and affect our neurotransmitters that are sent out through our neurons to tell our brain to be happy, to be sad, to be anxious, to be depressed, to feel content, all three of those are intricately connected. So the vitamins, the hormones, and the neurotransmitters all need to work together for us to feel really good.
I have a quick question for you. This might not be a quick question, but so early in this, you said, well, I like the way you kind of talked about the neurotransmitters, the hormones, the impact on the brain, the impact on the body. But earlier you also said we kind of want to check our cortisol and we want to make sure that we have appropriate zinc and B12 and vitamin D. And I know cortisol is hard to check. It's feisty, right? Because some say check cortisol through saliva. Some say check cortisol through blood. There's also, I think, timing has everything to do with it. Is this a big thing to unpack, or what's the best way to test cortisol and when?
Angie, cortisol is very important to check because sometimes the symptoms of high cortisol and low cortisol can be the same. So if you don't actually check the levels, you could guess wrong and treat in the wrong direction. So I love doing salivary cortisol tests, and this is far more efficient and effective than doing a blood serum cortisol test, partly because a blood serum cortisol test will just tell you right in that moment when you had your blood drawn at the doctor's office, and it's often heightened. Whereas a salivary test, actually putting salivation into tubes at 4 times in the day, morning upon waking, midday, mid-afternoon, and right before bed, that will tell you what your actual rhythm is throughout the day and night. And it's a very specific rhythm that all human beings are within that is considered normal. And so if you actually check these 4 times a day, and these tests can be done by conventional MDs and DOs. LabCorp offers it. A lot of doctors don't even know they have that at their disposal. And it can be covered by insurance. There's also specialty tests to run cortisol at home, and people can order their own labs. And that's something I like to remind them, because we often feel like if our doctor says, no, you don't need that, then we go, okay, I guess I don't need that. Your doctor may be absolutely right, but they also may not know every aspect of your sleep, energy level, stress at home. They don't know those details and may tell you that your cortisol is probably normal when it may not be. And so being able to test for those specific times of day is really empowering. And then you can do something about it. from lifestyle intervention to nutrition to actually incorporating natural supports like phosphatidylserine or actual cortisol. And then you can go higher interventions if necessary.
It's interesting because I did check my cortisol and I did it through an online site. And I did. I discovered I had a girlfriend who was using this one company and they're very, very reputable. And so I just kind of took it into my own hands and decided that I would do it myself. It's interesting, though, I didn't know that LabCorp does it too. And to your point, you can do it yourself and it's not outrageously expensive. So even if your doctor doesn't order it, we can empower ourselves to go get some of that testing done. So do you think that we covered that enough, or do you want to say more about the neurotransmitters or more about the hormones before we kind of move on?
No, I think we're going to talk about the specific nutrition more. And something that I'd like to mention, since we're talking about, being empowered in your health, is something people want to know is what are the main nutrients that I need to be taking to support my mental health? And I mentioned some of those. Vitamin D and B12 are the nutrients that I see low on labs the most often. And that's even if you live in Southern California like I do. I see deficient vitamin D all the time here. So just, a takeaway for anyone just in the first few minutes today, knowing your vitamin D levels is important, and knowing your B12. Knowing beyond that is very helpful as well. But those are the two that I see low most often, and they're both crucial for hormone synthesis. Also, many people are already on anti-anxiolytics, antidepressants, and if they are interested in coming off, they often want to know, well, what do I need to know nutrition-wise? And first, it's important to look into what nutritional deficiencies are actually caused by the medications that you may be on. And those are B12, again, vitamin D, zinc, selenium, CoQ10, B6. So finding out about those is important, and then going, okay, what are my next steps going to be if I actually want to reduce medication? Well, making sure to boost those nutrient levels so they're not deficient is a great first step.
So in line with that, let's say that I take D supplements and I take B supplements. Is it possible that I could test really well in those supplements, but maybe how do I want to say this? Is that a true face value for how well I am actually holding those nutrients in my body? Or is that just more like the supplements doing the work? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And Angie, that's a great question, because so many of us take supplements every day and we wonder if they're doing their job. So first of all, if your GI health is good and you absorb your vitamins well, you should be internalizing and utilizing most of those vitamins effectively. And if you run a blood test and see, okay, my B12 is normal and my vitamin D is normal, then that is a good indicator that they're probably functioning well in your body, especially vitamin D, because there's different forms. And so when you get your labs tested for vitamin D, you're actually looking at the 125 version, which is the active form. So you know that it is the active form in your body and it's doing its job. So with vitamin D, you can be pretty confident if your numbers are in the normal range or functionally normal, which we like to see over about 50, 60, whereas conventional labs will say anything over 30 is normal. So you can trust that your vitamin D is being utilized. B12, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated because, yes, if your numbers are normal, you have enough B12 running around in your blood system. But we also have this amazing system called our genetics, and we have things called methylation SNPs. And 1 in 4 to 5 people actually has a methylation SNP on their genetics that affects how they absorb B12. So some people, even if they're getting adequate B12 for the general public, if they have a heterozygous or homozygous genetic SNP on the MTHFR gene, they may need more methyl B12 than the average person. And a way to find out about that is to actually run your genetics, which you can do. And you can look at an inflammation marker in the blood. If you're not ready to go and run your whole genetics, then you can look at homocysteine in the blood. Homocysteine is an inflammatory marker that will go up if you're not utilizing your B12. So that may sound a little complicated, but basically, if you wonder if your B12 is doing what it should in your body, first you test for B12, see that the numbers are normal, but also check for homocysteine and make sure your inflammation isn't high. If inflammation is high, you may need more B12 than the average individual.
I'm going to have to re-listen to this episode about 20 times. But I'm over here going, yay, because I'm getting blood work done tomorrow. And I just told my doctor to order homocysteine. So there you go.
I'm so happy to hear it. Well done.
And then I'm going to be putting you on speed dial. And when we hang up, I'm going to, hopefully you'll run through everything else again. So, Nitiya, I want to reintroduce you. So again, this is Strong Mind, Strong Body. I'm Angie Miller. I'm so glad you joined us because I think this is such a powerful episode. My guest is Nitiya Guin, and we are talking about hormones, nutrition, and mental health, and basically how our nutritional deficiencies could be affecting our hormones and therefore impacting our mental health and well-being. And so we want to do all the right things, right? We want to be physically healthy, but we also want to feel like we're mentally sound. So, Nitiya, let's move on and talk about the relationship between estrogen and anxiety in women, because how women can support estrogen, healthy estrogen levels naturally, especially post-menopause. That's a tricky one.
It absolutely is. And the topic of estrogen and what's normal is another big one in medicine where not everyone agrees. There's kind of like cortisol has a very specific rhythm throughout the day, and it should change significantly. Estrogen should change significantly throughout the month. It spikes right before we get our periods. It is low during the period and starts to go up afterward, accounting for why we feel so much better right after the period ends and going into the luteal phase. And then, so that's for people who are women who are still menstruating. So checking estrogen levels at a particular time of month and knowing when you check them is important. So monitoring your cycle is very helpful in finding out if your values are actually normal. And for postmenopausal women, the estrogen should be more of a flat curve throughout the month. It doesn't change as much, but there should still be estrogen in the system. And so we're often told that it's absolutely fine after menopause for estrogen and progesterone to go down to zero. And that's not true. Just because the ovaries aren't making it anymore, we still make it in our fat. We still need it to protect our mood and our heart. A lot of people don't know that estrogen is involved in the electrical impulse in the heart, and it's also important for bone health. So a couple of options with increasing estrogen naturally post-menopause are to increase zinc, get your B complex, as you mentioned, and also increasing good fat. So many women focus on reducing fat in our diet. Still to this day, I remember being raised being told fat was bad. Well, now we understand good fat is awesome. We really want to be careful with simple sugars and additives to food. We want to keep food dyes out, things like that. We want lots of good fat, and that helps you make more estrogen. Additionally, there are phytoestrogenic foods like soy and flaxseed that help keep a little bit of more estrogen in the system, which is crucial after menopause. Maca and Vitex are two of my favorite herbs to take to modulate estrogen to adequate levels. Also, and this is a whole nother podcast, is talking about bioidentical hormones. And that is an option as well if we need to go there. I don't jump to that first. It really depends what the individual woman needs. But as I mentioned, it can be protective for other systems in the body. And remember, I mentioned it's bioidentical is much safer than using conventional estrogen sources, which actually are not made in a lab, but come from horse urine, which has a lot of side effects and a whole lot of issues. So that's why if we are going to consider estrogen, we want to consider bioidenticals. But I love all of the phytoestrogens and supports that I mentioned before that first.
It's interesting as you talk about estrogen and all the good things about keeping estrogen. And you're right. I think women hear a lot that, well, after, menopause, you're not going to have any estrogen. But the thing is, I read the XX brain. And one of the biggest things is estrogen impacts brain health. And so where women are so compromised post-menopause is if there's no estrogen, there's not a lot of protective barrier for the brain. Estrogen is good. And so I feel like we are, as our world changes and we latch onto different things and different things become, quote, in vogue, we learn more and more. But am I right about estrogen in the brain?
You are absolutely right, Angie. So estrogen actually affects the amount of GABA and glutamate in the brain, which affects the serotonin levels, and it increases the receptor density for serotonin in the brain. So estrogen continues to be important for the rest of our lives in our brains, absolutely. And because it helps actually create serotonin, it's important that we continue to get estrogen in small amounts for the rest of our lives.
It's interesting. My daughter, who is young and loves TikTok, was like, "Oh, that's the big thing now to talk about cortisol." Going back to cortisol, and I was
Yes.
like, "The big thing to talk about cortisol now." And she's like, "Yeah, it's all over TikTok." I thought, isn't that funny? Like that is, I think that is the good and the bad about all of this is that things become in vogue, and all of a sudden she's like, "Oh, everybody's talking about cortisol." I'm like, "Honey, cortisol's always been talked about, but I guess it's made the TikTok, whatever you want to call it. But I guess that's good because now some younger people or whoever is on TikTok has a better understanding of the impact of cortisol. So I guess that's good."
Absolutely, Angie. And when we have kids, we were talking about our daughters. I have 3 children. One of them is a teenager. And we have this joke about how I've been telling her her entire life about the importance of more water, getting her vitamins, keeping out, the artificial colors, taking the ashwagandha herbs I try to give her, having her tea at night. She doesn't want to hear anything about it from me. But a year later, she'll tell me, "Oh, Mom, guess what I learned on TikTok? I should be taking ashwagandha." And I'm like, "Are you serious?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then I just bite my tongue because however she takes in that information and actually uses it to make good choices for herself, I'm thrilled with. So I love that there are some positive aspects that we're hearing about for social media. But as you said, we do need to be careful with those buzzwords. It used to be everybody talked about adrenal fatigue, and it was this big, broad, what exactly does that mean? And now we understand that that really often has to do with cortisol or cortisol precursors, which is a nice place to mention that cortisol precursors are the same precursors to cholesterol and to estrogen and testosterone. So when we talk about our hormone health and having the adequate amount of estrogen and testosterone, we want to make sure our cortisol is not spiking through the roof. And if we see our cholesterol levels that don't make sense because we eat really healthy, the cholesterol could be changing because the hormones are off.
Yeah.
So yes, cortisol is super important. TikTok's right.
Okay, well, that's good. That is good. And to your point, we have those conversations a lot where I'm thinking, I know I told you that, but then yes, so I just have to bite my tongue. So let's go to the boys. Let's hear it for the boys. How about the men? How does testosterone affect their mood? Because estrogen affects our mood, it affects our brain health. How does testosterone affect their mood?
Absolutely. So testosterone also increases dopamine receptors in the brain, and it increases serotonin production. And it's more specific for neurogenesis and actually healing nerves than estrogen is. So testosterone is really important for neuroplasticity, for being able to think straight. So for those people who have unexplained brain fog all the time, testosterone is an important place to look. And women have testosterone as well, but we're going to focus on men here. When testosterone is optimal, you can think straight, your mood is good, you feel confident. When it's low, it's linked to depression and fatigue. And we can talk about a few ways to naturally support testosterone because it often gets depleted when cortisol is too high. Again, back to the cortisol. So there are the lifestyle things to do. Find ways to reduce stress, or at least take moments in the day where you completely get into a restful state so that cortisol stops spiking and testosterone can be made again. But also, there are other areas that we see a lot in our society that we can do something about. And that is with testosterone, we want to avoid aromatization, which means we don't want testosterone to become estrogen. Right? We want men to have a nice high amount of testosterone. We don't want it converting into estrogen. That's when we start to see men who are more depressed, more sad, even starting to see in the long term changes in their body where they're getting more fat around the middle, changes in their pecs where they're starting to look more like breasts, the gynecomastia concerns. So this can happen when there's too much fat on the body because, again, estrogen is made in fat. Mm-hmm. So if someone is obese, they are more likely to have low testosterone, partly because that testosterone is becoming estrogen. Another place to look is where we're getting our food. Next time you think about stopping at a fast food place where meat was injected with hormones, that means you're going to get those hormones in your system. We don't want exogenous hormones coming into our system. It doesn't boost testosterone. It boosts estrogen, and it confuses the precursor to testosterone, which is DHEA, and shunts it towards cholesterol. Another area where you go, whoa, why is my cholesterol through the roof? I don't eat that much bad fat. Well, the meat you're eating, if it's full of hormones, is shunting it in that direction. So more organic, free range food, less fat on the body. And then my favorite one is to talk about, having a good sexual health is important for raising testosterone. There's so much research about how having sex regularly, especially with one partner, actually increases testosterone. It increases lots of other important areas for increased mood and joy and satisfaction as well. But a healthy sex life with a consistent partner actually raises testosterone as well.
Well, there you go, everybody. So see, now that you've listened to Strong Mind, Strong Body, we've all just given you permission to have a very healthy sex life. So there you go. If we accomplished nothing else and no one got anything else, they're all going, well, okay, I'm glad. So that's a great thing to bring up. So we, in the spirit of time, and that's a whole nother episode, Dr. Ruth. So I would like to know, before we close up, because Nitiya, just, teaser for everybody, Nitiya is going to come back because we have a lot of ground to cover. We have so much more that we need to share. And Nitiya is a wealth of knowledge. And so she doesn't know this, but I'm going to be on a plane and landing on her doorstep tomorrow. So is there another kind of, we had lots of things we were going to cover. And in the spirit of time, what's something that you think you really want to land on before we close the show? That might set us up for our next show, but also help close some of these topics.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angie. And, we talked about some of the nutrients you may want to increase, or nutrients you may want to have tested in your labs and find out if they're high enough. And, you can do a more extensive panel, like a micronutrient panel. You don't just have to ask your doctor to add on vitamin D, B12, folate, iron, and ferritin are important as well. You can do a micronutrient panel on your own. And as Angie mentioned, there's lots of trusted online sources. I like Everlywell. I work with Well Pros, so you can go to my site and link to some of the best tests there. But as we talk about nutrients and food, I want to briefly discuss digestive health, because so many people ignore issues in digestion. irritable bowel syndrome, which encompasses, constipation to loose stools to a combination to constant bloating after eating. This is something that 1 in 3 people deals with, and we hardly ever talk about it. And some people kind of deal with it by just, taking a magnesium supplement at night or taking certain probiotics and whatnot, which can be helpful, but you're often wondering if they're working well or not. So consider this when you think about your own GI health. Do you go to the bathroom regularly? Do you feel good after you eat, or do you get brain fog? And then think about, how does that affect your mood? The topic of this whole conversation. We make 90 to 95% of our serotonin in our GI lining. It comes from tryptophan, which we have to get in our food. That's an essential amino acid. We get it in turkey, chicken, eggs, fish, nuts, whole grains. We don't get it in processed sugars and all these bad foods. So when you think about your own mental health, remember to consider, what am I bringing into my GI system? Because it's in your gastrointestinal tract that you make most of the serotonin, which is your long-term happy hormone.
It's interesting because I have not been sleeping well, as I had shared with you, Nitiya, and last night I took magnesium. And I forgot. I'm just going to leave it at that for those of you who may or may not take magnesium. So it does have quite a bang. So, but Nitiya, you just shared a wealth of information, and I really appreciate all of you listening. This is a big, meaty topic. Nitiya is going to come back. We're going to deep dive into some more of this. But Nitiya, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you to all of our Strong Mind, Strong Body listeners. Nitiya, if somebody has a question, how would they reach you to get some follow-up information?
Great. Thank you, Angie. So they can find out about the labs that I offer, my concierge services. I love that you said you were going to call me before you go see your doctor, because my patients do actually get to call me and text me. So you can go to Dr. Nitiya, just drnitiya.com, and our office number is there. My personal practice is quite full, but I have a lot of wonderful resources, and I am happy to see if we're a good fit and get patients seeing me. I also have a retreat coming up in January with Desi Bartlett, who introduced us, and I love taking very special time to support people so that they have the tools to then feel fabulous all year long.
And you and I are going to set up a retreat.
I love it.
So we've got an upcoming retreat as well. So after I get through my next retreat. So thank you again to all of our Strong Mind, Strong Body listeners. We will see you next week.